am reviewing today The Magic of Oz by L. Frank Baum. This is the 13th book in the Complete Stories of Oz series. This is the second to the last Oz book that L. Frank Baum wrote before he died. He wrote one more Oz book after this, Glinda of Oz, but this is the second to the last one. So, a few personal bits here, first of all. One, I'm doing this as a buddy read with Dane Reads. I'll link to his review of this in the description down below. Secondly, if you check out his review, and by the way, I recommend that you check out his review because his reviews are very short, succinct, and to the point. For whatever reason, I seem to be constitutionally incapable of filming reviews less than 30 minutes. I always tell myself it's going to be a quick one, and then I always just ramble on and on. Dane's review is 6 minutes. Just 6 minutes of your life, that's all. So check out his review before checking out mine. But when you check that out, you'll notice that he posted his a month ago. So apologies to Dane. I've completely fallen off the schedule for this Buddy Reads. The past 6 months of my life have been insanely busy, as you know if you've been watching this channel, because every time I make a video, it's just an apology for not having done any reading because I'm too busy. But I'm trying to get back on track with this. So I actually finished this book a month ago. Didn't get around to doing the review because I was too busy. And then by the time it came where I had some free time to get the review done, like now, I realized I had forgotten the book. So the past couple weeks I've been reviewing it on audiobook. You can find them on YouTube. It's a LibriVox recording uploaded onto YouTube. They've got those for all the Oz books. I'll try and remember to link to it down in the description down below. I've listened to that a few times over, and I think I've gotten myself back up to speed, but, apologies if I fudge any details. The other thing I want to mention is that throughout these Oz series reviews, I've been relying on and being entertained by the review series by Mary Ness, who about 10 years ago reviewed all 40 canonical Oz stories, Oz books, for the website Tor.com. This was 10 years ago that she did it, but the books haven't changed, so the reviews are still as good as they were when they were written 10 years ago. She's really a lot of fun to read. She's got a sharp wit. She picks up a lot of stuff. So throughout this whole series, I've been relying on her reviews, and I'll link to her review of this book in the description down below. If you read it, you will notice that she absolutely hates this book. Marie Ness is not a fan of The Magic of Oz. And she makes some good points in her review, and I don't disagree with her. For one thing, L. Frank Baum is recycling plots again. So he's got a couple different plots here. One is it's Ozma's birthday again. So Ozma's birthday was the same plot as book number 5, The Road to Oz. Like, oh no, it's Ozma's birthday. Everybody panic. Now, in the Road to Oz, I think the big thing was that everybody wanted to get an invitation to Ozma's birthday party. So as Dorothy and her friends are wandering around the road, the various creatures they encounter say, oh, it's Ozma's birthday. Can you make sure we get invited to the party? That was the big overhanging concern, is who will get invited to Ozma's party. Changes a little bit here. Now it's Ozma's birthday. What is everyone going to get her? It's a dilemma because Ozma's already the ruler of Oz and lives in the palace and has everything she could possibly want. Plus, she's a fairy princess. The fairy princess element of Ozma is something that's only kind of come in the last few books. Was not a big part of her character in the big books, but by now it's established. Was not a big part of her character in the beginning books, is what I meant to say. But yes, by this point in the series, it's established that she's a fairy princess with magical powers. So, what do you get? A princess who has everything and has magical powers. So that's the big dilemma. The various characters have sorted out things that they want to get Ozma, but Dorothy has nothing to get Ozma. That's one plot. There are a couple different plots going on. The second plot is yes. So there's this teenager named Kiki Aru who discovers this magical word. It's a magical word. Pirzaquixel is how it's pronounced in the audiobook. I think as it's originally spelled, it's a bunch of consonants together, something that looks unpronounceable. Anyways, this magical word, you say it and it can transform you into anything you want to be transformed into, or you can transform other people into things. So he discovers this magical word. Now, Ozma has forbidden magic. It's one of the many inconsistencies in this series. She's forbidden magic, but then every Oz book, there's some magical creature who's defying this. Anyways, he finds out the word from his father's secret room. His father was a magician before Ozma had forbidden magic. Changes himself into a bird. Does a brief travel through some of the other lands that L. Frank Baum had written about. So this is L. Frank Baum had written a few other fantasy books besides his Oz series, and he's always trying to tie them in. And I believe on the map that's now established as the Oz map, these places are all on the map around the Deadly Desert, which is around Oz. So he goes through the Candyland, and I forget what the other places are. But then he ends up teaming up with the Gnome King. Rogido is his name, I believe. So Rogido wants revenge on the Oz people, so he wants to muster a great army that can go in and conquer the Oz people, which is the exact same plot as Book 6, the Emerald City. The Emerald City of Oz, Book 6. So we're recycling two plots here again. Now, an invasion of the land of Oz is the kind of thing that could kind of be cool. On the one hand, it doesn't really fit tonally with these series, but putting that aside, you could have this huge epic battle, all the evil creatures on one side, all the good creatures on the other side. The horn of battle is blown, and then this epic charge as something like those Narnia movies or the Lord of the Rings. Fun to imagine, interesting in theory, but the problem with this subplot is that we never get to that stage. Both in Book 6, when we had the subplot the first time, and now here again in Book 13, when L. Frank Baum is repeating it, it's all about the Gnome King going around trying to get allies for his invasion. And the actual invasion of Oz never really happens. So that was kind of interesting the first time around in Book 6, but when it's being repeated and now they're going around and rounding up allies again, you think, okay, seen this once already. But the thing that I think just sinks it, the thing that really sinks this book, is in Book 6, when the Gnome King finally had assembled his army and they tunneled underground and they emerged in Oz, they were defeated by the Fountain of Oblivion, which is this fountain that if you drink from it, you forget everything. So they emerged from the tunnel. They emerged right next to the Fountain of Oblivion. They were thirsty because they had been digging through the tunnel. They saw the water, they drank it, and they immediately forgot everything. They forgot they were evil. They forgot that they wanted to conquer Oz, and the invasion was over. That happened all in Book 6. In the subsequent books, L. Frank Baum played fast and loose with his continuity about whether or not the Gnome King had actually lost his memory. I mean, initially he tried to say, okay, he did lose his memory, but then he just disregarded that completely. And the Gnome King had all his memories back from the previous books. I forgave that because it's well established by this point in the series that L. Frank Baum has a very loose attitude towards continuity. He doesn't really care about it. So the fact that in book 6 it's established that the Gnome King completely lost his memories, and then later he didn't lose his memories. But by this point in the series, we're past that. We're past getting upset about that. But now that the Gnome King is invading Oz a second time, then Dorothy gets the idea, oh, well, why don't we just use the Fountain of Oblivion and make him forget his memories? And I'm reading that and I thought, no, you already did that. You already made the Gnome King forget his... I forgave the fact that L. Frank Baum had disregarded from continuity the fact that the Gnome King had lost his memories the first time. But then we need a resolution to the fact that the Gnome King is evil and wants to conquer Oz. And we go back to the Fountain of Oblivion again after we had already done it once and then forgotten that we did it once. And then these books, I mean, they're classics, but they require a lot of forgiveness on the part of the reader if you're going to march your way through this series. So that's what really sunk it for me. To drag that up again after we had used it and disregarded it. But sorry, before I go into my butts, let me get a few more jabs in here. If you'll read Marie Ness's review, which I'll link below, she hates this book. Although not exactly for the reasons I do. She doesn't make a big deal about the Fountain of Oblivion being used a second time. But she does make a big deal about the fact that it's just boring. I mean, Ozma's having a birthday. What are we going to get her? Oh, how boring this is. It is very much her tone. And Marie Ness points out that the Dorothy, after agonizing over what to get Ozma, decides on getting her a bunch of trained monkeys who are going to be miniaturized to pop out of a cake and do a song and dance. And Marie Ness says, really? This is what we come up with? This is going to be the perfect plan for Ozma? The perfect gift for Ozma? But then even after it's established, after all this, that Dorothy really wants these trained monkeys to pop out of the cake, and then she and the Wizard of Oz have to go and get the trained monkeys. Then, after a whole big deal about going to the forest and getting these trained monkeys, then as Marie Ness points out in her review, they barely... very little is made out of them popping up out of the cake at the end. It's just like, and then the monkeys popped out of the cake and did a little dance, and Ozma was happy. It's the whole thing is just dismissed in the few sentences after all this build up about the trained monkeys popping out of the cake. So yeah, Marie Ness attacks these books for being this book for being boring. The Gnome King wandering around with the Kiki Aru and the Piers of Quixel, she also thinks is pretty boring. And she says at the end of her review, she says, you can tell L. Frank Baum is just completely out of ideas at this point. She says any other author would have just stopped here. But L. Frank Baum still had one book left, even after even after this. There was still one. He still came back for Glinda of Oz, book number 14. On the other hand, if you go and watch Dane's review, Dane gives it a largely positive review, points out some things that he liked, points out some things that he didn't like. Dane points out, and I agree with him, that there's some sloppy writing here about using Tom Swifties, I believe is what they used to be called, using ly adjectives to describe how a character said something. Like the wizard said something smilingly, I think is the one the one Dane quotes in his review. When listening through to the audiobook the past couple weeks, I noticed that there were more than a few of those popping up. So there is some sloppy writing. There are also a whole bunch of jokes that just don't land. But the book does have its moments. There are some funny scenes in here. There are some funny one-liners in here. There are some words of wisdom, I think, mostly given out by, what was his name, Captain Trop. You know, no, Trot was the name of the little girl, right? What was Captain Bill was the name of the old sailor that Trot hangs out with. He's got some words of life advice, which some of them are insightful. As well, I think there are some genuinely... Sorry, I was going to say genuinely funny scenes, but that may be pushing it. There are some scenes that are so ridiculous that they can be a little bit interesting. Sorry, quick side note. I'm in a room in this apartment that I don't usually film in. Is the light flickering on and off, or is that just me? Apologies if anyone finds that distracting. So for example, there a fair amount of this book takes place in the forest. So Kiki Aru and the Gnome King are going into the forest to recruit the beasts to march against Oz and establish that the beasts in the forest kind of have their own society, which is in Oz but separate from the people of Oz. And they're ruled by I believe it was a leopard, Gugu the King. This whole thing about Oz, who rules what, is all a little bit confusing. So Gugu the King, I guess, is the king of the forest, but the Cowardly Lion is established as the king of the beasts. But everybody is under the control of Ozma, who's the ruler of all of Oz. Anyways, putting aside the fact that the chain of command in Oz is really confusing, yeah, they're ruled by a king called Gugu the Leopard King, who's got 5 counselors who kind of meet with them to decide policy. So there's Brew the Bear, Rango the Gray Ape, Lou the Unicorn. No, that's it. And there's a lot of manic energy in these forest scenes. For example, quoting from the beginning here of chapter 8, there had been trouble in the forest of Gugu that morning. Chippo the wild boar had bitten the tail off Arx the giraffe, while the latter had his head among the leaves of a tree eating his breakfast. Arx kicked with his heels and struck Tirrup, the great kangaroo, who had a new baby in her pouch. Tirrup knew it was the wild boar's fault, so she knocked him over with one powerful blow and then ran away to escape Chippo's sharp tusks. In the chase that followed, a giant porcupine stuck 50 sharp quills into the boar, and a chimpanzee in a tree threw a coconut at the porcupine that jammed its head into its body. So yeah, it's kind of like Looney Tunes or something. Like, you know, it's like a cartoon with all these crazy animals running around in the forest. I'm not sure whether this is whether to say this is really creative or whether to say this is kind of desperate, and maybe L. Frank Baum was a little over caffeinated or hyped up on something when he wrote these, or sleep deprived or something. But it holds your interests, and this kind of manic energy pacing continues a bit when Dorothy and the wizard and their friends arrive in the forest. And then Kiki Aru and the Gnome King are around. And Kiki Aru starts transforming different creatures into different things using his magic word. And they're being transformed, but they can't tell who's doing it because Kiki Aru is hiding. So people are getting transformed. They're trying to figure out who's doing the transforming. Dane points out in his review one of the more successful comic bits in here is that the Gnome King gets transformed into a goose, which is embarrassing, first of all, because he feels silly being a goose. But second of all, it's established previously in the Oz series that gnomes are dreadfully afraid of eggs. Eggs are like the only thing that can hurt a gnome. So the now that he's a goose, he's terrified that he's going to lay an egg. So that yeah, it was turning him into the thing that produces the eggs that he is most terrified as. Is cruel, but it's a funny scene. And then in an effort, the plan is they're going to change these beasts into giant soldiers to march on the land of Oz. So they use the magic word to change these monkeys into huge soldiers, but they forget to wait until they get out of the forest. So there are all these huge soldiers who want to get changed back into monkeys, who are now stuck in the trees because they didn't wait to change them until they got out of the trees. And so they're going up, and who is it? One of the characters is able to climb up and talk to the heads of the giant soldiers who are really monkeys who are stuck in the trees. It's all right. I mean, it's, again, I'm not sure whether to say it's good writing or just manic, zany, desperate writing, but I can't bring myself to hate this book completely, even with all its flaws. It's kind of interesting. There's another whole subplot I haven't been talking about, how Trot and Captain Bill are going to get this magic flower, and they arrive on this island, which turns out to be a trap, because when you get on this island, you can't move your feet, and you end up growing roots. So that is going on as well. That's not quite so interesting. But somebody pointed out, actually, in the comments on Marie Ness's review, that the way the plots resolve themselves has a certain efficiency. So the glass cat goes from the island, she goes back to the forest. Dorothy and her friends are at the forest to get the monkeys. The Gnome King and Kiki Aru are at the forest to recruit an army of wild beasts. And then once everyone is in place, then the plots just nicely resolve themselves. They're able to defeat the Gnome King and Kiki Aru, then they meet the glass cat, then they're able to go and save Trot and Captain Bill. Somebody said in the comments that they were examining the manuscript for this book, and that it looked like L. Frank Baum only wrote it through once, and that perhaps the way things were able to very neatly resolve themselves was more of a coincidence than something that was planned, but it works out. The other thing, probably the last thing I'll mention, is something that Dane pointed out in his review, is that this whole thing about people not being able to die in the land of Oz is getting ridiculous here. This is something that got introduced fairly early on, book 3 or 4, I think. as part of L. Frank Baum's presumably attempts to make the Land of Oz a happy utopia where children can feel safe or imagine a real happy place. But it was one of his worst ideas because since he's established it, he's never been able to create any sort of dramatic tension in his books without either disregarding it or creating some stupid rules around it. So as Dane points out, one of the ways to get around it in this book is the Gnome King at one point threatens. He said, okay, well, I can't kill you in the Land of Oz, but I can chop you into 1,000 different pieces and scatter them around. And those pieces will still be alive. But, what kind of a life would that be? There's another part where the Khalida are something that goes all the way back to book 1. These fearsome creatures that have the heads of tigers and bodies of bears, I believe. They attack Trot and Captain Bill. And Captain Bill just takes a stake and pounds it through the Khalida. Now, you can't kill anybody in the Land of Oz. So the Khalida is just impaled on the stake and stuck into the ground. Eventually, he gets himself freed from this, but now he's just got this huge hole right through the middle of him. And he mentions going off to seek the king of the Khalidas, who has some magic. Yeah, why not? I guess that now there's a king of the Khalidas, and the king of the Khalida has magic. This is something that wasn't set up in any of the other Oz books, but these things just pop up. But yeah, this idea that he's got this huge hole in the middle of him where he gets impaled with a stake. At this point, you just want to say, this thing about people not being able to die is not working. You're not in the first book, way back in the first book, so many things and people were dying. There was a giant spider that was eating the animals in the forest. There were 40 wolves that were killed by the Tin Woodman. There were 40 ravens where the scarecrow broke their necks. But now that people can't die, they just get chopped up into pieces or get impaled through with a... Yeah, I mean, if you're going to have violent conflict in your book, then I mean, if you want a rule where nobody dies, then just get rid of violent conflict in your book, because it's more grotesque the way he's doing it. But he can't make it consistent. And as I said before in these reviews, I'll forgive inconsistencies between books. Kind of. I've gotten to that point in the series. But try and keep it consistent within the book. But it's apparent that things can be eaten. Creatures can be eaten in here, which is obviously a form of dying, right? If you get eaten and digested, that's dying. So if that's going on, I'm going to finish up the book here. I mean, I don't know really what is left to say about it at this point in the series. By any objective measure, it's pretty terrible. It's still kind of entertaining to read. I don't know. The way I justify spending my time with these books is that they're classics of sorts. Yeah, at this point in the series, L. Frank Baum is really at the bottom of the barrel. Although I'm told that the last book actually is one of his better books. But I'm going to tackle that next. So next, the final book by L. Frank Baum, Glinda of Oz.